Hello, and welcome back to Write America, a literary series spearheaded by author Roger Rosenblatt in an effort to bridge the great divide in our country through readings and conversations from award-winning, nationally renowned authors and new and emerging writers. I'm Lauren, Book Review's publicist and event coordinator, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all tonight for episode 7, featuring Linda Pastan, Paul Harding, and Juan Felipe Herrera. So I thank you so much for your patience in waiting for us to start the event. Juan was having a little tech problem, so I'm hoping that we can get him up when it's his turn to read. So yeah, we'll get to that later. But if you missed last week's episode with Alan and Arlene Alda, or any of the previous episodes of Write America, you can go to Book Review's Crowdcast channel and watch the recordings at any time. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you know anyone who couldn't make it live tonight, they'll have the opportunity to watch it too. I'll drop the link for last week's episode with the Aldas in the chat once the readings are underway. But before we get started, I'd like to give you just a little tour around Crowdcast in case this is your first time here with us. First, there is a button right down here. If you click that button, it'll bring you to bookreview.com, where you can purchase signed copies of Linda, Paul, and Juan's books. There is also an Ask a Question button down here. I see somebody already submitted a question. There's going to be an audience Q&A at the end of the event. So just drop your questions in there if they come up, and we'll get to those at the end. And then I see there is the chat, or I think it's over here on this side. You have a chat where you can comment about the event. I see Juan is in the chat, so hopefully we can get him on screen. So yeah, you can drop your emoji applause in there as well if you like the reading. But yeah, so I hope you all enjoy tonight, and we're gonna get started. So our first reader this evening is Linda Pastan. Linda is a former poet laureate of Maryland and has published 15 volumes of poetry, most recently Insomnia, which was winner of the Towson University Prize for Literature, and A Dog Runs Through It. She has won numerous awards, including the Radcliffe Distinguished Alumni Award, the Maurice English Award. In 2003, she won the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize for Lifetime Achievement, and 2 of her books have been finalists for the National Book Award. So please welcome to the screen, Linda Pastan. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you.
I'm very excited to hear what you have for us tonight, so I'm going to leave you to it. Good luck.
Okay. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks, Roger. Before this happened, every day of the week was the same, but now at least Monday nights are different. I'm going to start with an early poem that seems to me to have some relevance to what we're all going through now. It's called Ethics. In ethics class so many years ago, our teacher asked this question every fall. If there were a fire at a museum, which would you save? A Rembrandt painting, or an old woman who hadn't many years left anyhow? Restless on hard chairs, caring little for pictures or old age, we'd opt 1 year for life, the next for art, and always half-heartedly. Sometimes the woman borrowed my grandmother's face, leaving her usual kitchen to wander some drafty, half-imagined museum. 1 year, feeling clever, I replied, why not let the woman decide herself? Linda, the teacher would report, eschews the burdens of responsibility. This fall, in a real museum, I stand before a real Rembrandt, old woman, or nearly so, myself. The colors within this frame are darker than autumn, darker even than winter, the browns of earth, though earth's most radiant elements burn through the canvas. I know now that woman and painting and season are almost one, and all beyond saving by children. I thought of this poem now because of the people that are having to decide who gets the vaccination. Should it be the old people who, as my poem says, don't have many years left anyhow? Or the younger, less vulnerable people, but who, if they die, will have lost a whole lifetime. So these are the kinds of things we discussed every week in ethics, for which there are no real answers. This poem is called What We Want. What we want is never simple. We move among the things we thought we wanted, a face, a room, an open book, and these things bear our names. Now they want us. But what we want appears in dreams, wearing disguises. We fall past holding out our arms, and in the morning, our arms ache. We don't remember the dream, but the dream remembers us. It is there all day, as an animal is there under the table, as the stars are there, even in full sun. And I'm going to read the title poem of an earlier book, An Early Afterlife, that begins with an epigraph from Horace: a wise man in time of peace shall make the necessary preparations for war. An early afterlife. Why don't we say goodbye right now in the fallacy of perfect health, before whatever is going to happen happens? We could perfect our parting like those characters in On the Beach who said farewell in the shadow of the bomb as we sat watching, young and holding hands at the movies. We could use the loving words we otherwise might not have time to say. We could hold each other for hours in a quintessential dress rehearsal. Then we would just continue for however many years were left. The ragged things that are coming next, arteries closing like rivers silting over, or rampant cells stampeding us to the exit, would be like postscripts to our lives and wouldn't matter. And we would bask in an early afterlife of ordinary days, impervious to the inclement weather already in our long-range forecast. Nothing could touch us. We'd never have to say goodbye again. I have a number of poems that take as their title questions that I've gotten in Q&As, and this is one of those, so you won't have to ask me this later on. Why are your poems so dark? Isn't the moon dark too, most of the time? And doesn't the white page seem unfinished without the dark stain of alphabets? When God demanded light, he didn't banish darkness. Instead, he invented ebony and crows and that small mole on your left cheekbone. Or did you mean to ask, why are you sad so often? Ask the moon. Ask what it has witnessed. One of the things I thought we might discuss later on when we have our conversation is political poetry, whether one sits down and writes a poem trying to convince something of somebody. I happen to think that all poems in their own way are political, but I do have one poem that I wrote with a specific message in mind. I don't generally believe in having poems with messages. It's about global warming, and I'm going to end with that. But before I read it, I'm going to read a much earlier poem that shows the effects of global warming, although I didn't have any idea when I wrote it that that was why the bank in front of our house at the beach was disappearing year by year. I just thought it was something that happened. Never occurred to me that humans could have anything to do with that. So this was a poem I wrote then called Erosion. We are slowly undermined, grain by grain, inch by inch, slippage. It happens as we watch. The waves move their long row of sides over the beach. It happens as we sleep, the way the clock's hands move continuously just out of sight, but more like an hourglass than a clock, for here, sand is running out. We wake to water. Implacably lovely is this view, though it will swallow us whole. Soon there will be nothing left but view. We have tried a seawall. We have tried prayer. We have planted grasses on the bank, small tentacles, hooks of green that catch on nothing. For the wind does its work, the water does its sure work. One day the sea will simply take us. The children press their faces to the glass as if the windows were portholes and the house fills with animals. 2 dogs, a bird, cats. We are becoming an ark already. The gulls will follow our wake. We are made of water anyway. I can feel it in the yielding of your flesh, though sometimes I think that you are sand moving slowly, slowly from under me. And the poem I'm going to end with is in a form called a pantun. It's a Malaysian form based on the repetition of lines in a specific order from stanza to stanza. But all you have to know is that you'll be hearing each line twice. And the poem is called Years After the Garden. Years after the garden closed on Adam, 1,000 gardens take its place. Hold my hand, I hear the waters rising. Roses, lemons, lilac, hemlock, grape. 1,000 gardens take its place. Is each an Eden waiting to be lost? Roses, lemons, lilac, hemlock, grape. What was God thinking when he made the apple? Is each an Eden waiting to be lost? Seeds of knowledge, carelessness, and greed. What was God thinking when he made the apple? Did he do it only for the story? Seeds of knowledge, carelessness, and greed. They say the ice cap is already melting. Did he do it only for the story? Meringues of childhood melted on the tongue. They say the ice cap is already melting. The angel still waits with his flaming sword. Meringues of childhood melted on the tongue, but innocence alone will never save us. The angel still waits with his flaming sword. Flowers and vegetables, forests tremble. Innocence alone will never save us. How beautiful the world is in the morning. Flowers and vegetables, forests tremble. How beautiful the world is in the morning. Years ago, the garden closed on Adam. Hold my hand. I hear the waters rising. Thank you.
Beautiful, Linda. Sorry, I'm just going to be a disembodied voice for a second until my computer turns back on. That was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you for the conversation, so just hang on, okay? All right. Okay, well, up next, we have a reading from Mr. Paul Harding. Paul is the author of 2 prior novels about multiple generations of a New England family, Enon, and the 2010 Pulitzer Prize-winning Tinkers. He teaches at Stony Brook, Southampton, but he's skipping out on his class tonight to be with us this evening. So please welcome to the screen, Mr. Paul Harding. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Lauren. How are you doing?
Good. All right. I'm going to leave you to it.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you, Linda and Juan Felipe. It's a great honor to be here with you tonight. I'm going to read a little bit from I'm going to take my earphone just for a second while I read because I'm getting feedback. I'm going to read a little bit from a novel in progress. Just three pages or so. I think all you need to know about it is very loosely based on an historical set of events that had to do with a racially integrated settlement on an island off the coast of southern Maine that was there from the 1790s until 1912. When the state of Maine summarily kicked all of the settlers, all the inhabitants off the island. This is just a little episode that happens early in the book. And I think this is unplanned, but it's maybe keeping with the tone that Linda has already set with talking, not only referring to the Bible, but referring specifically to stories from Genesis. So this island, the settlement, was originally founded by a guy who was either freed or escaped black African-American slave and his Irish wife. She was from Galway, Ireland. So in the bit that I'm going to read, you'll hear referred to the different shades of Noah's son's skin. There's a certain tradition of their names mean different shades of skin. So it's just part of what shows up in the novel. So here we go. Nathan split wood and fetched water and went to school lessons. And afterward, he took the pencil and sheet of white paper that Leah Diamond, his teacher, had given him, and a flat board his father had found for him, and he walked to the little bluff facing the mainland. He reached into one of his shirt's breast pockets and took out a small, dull spoon and a medicine bottle made of blue glass. In the passages just previous to this, the reader will have discovered that he's a good artist. He's a budding drawer, so he likes to draw still lifes. He arranged the spoon and bottle on a rounded step of the bare granite at the top of the bluff, worn and pitted by glaciers. From the other shirt pocket, he gently scooped a dead chickadee he had found by the schoolhouse that morning. The bird was sleek and unruffled, its claws curled and retracted against its body. It was impossible to tell how it had died. Nathan could not believe one of the island cats had not found it first and eaten it. The body had begun to smell in his pocket during school, faintly at first, but more, it seemed, as the morning went along. He laid the bird in front of the medicine bottle and spoon. The noon sun was brighter, more glaring and direct than he'd have liked. He found a stick from a scrub oak and wedged it into a seam in the granite and removed his shirt and draped it across the stick's branches, making an awning over the bottle, bird, and spoon. He sat on the granite and hunched over and began to draw, starting with the bird. At first, the outline of the bird floated, curled, and dead in absolute white space. Then came the bottle and spoon, and the three objects rested on a common, invisible plane. Nathan sweated and became hot and distractedly wiped his face and the salty drops that ran down his forehead and hung suspended from the tip of his nose. Wind and surf reverberating against the rocks and through the trees, the noon sun unclouded and raining straight above, afternoon chores, his father and Grammy and sisters and the island itself all dissolved into a single uninterrupted buzz as Nathan drew and found the lines and their weight with the pencil, pushing its tip or easing up, observing the lines darken or lighten, lend depths or define surfaces, render light bending through the bottle, or a shiny little sun spooled and pooled in the bottom of the spoon's bowl, or still being collected in death inside the fine feathers of the chickadee's black hooded head, stored within them until the flesh they were fastened to perished and they swirled away over the rocks and off the bluff into the air, leaving only a frail little machine of bones. Nathan drew and imagined the earth after the flood, and Noah's sons and wives ranging across plains and cragged hills, and wondered whether at first they found the bodies of the drowned everywhere they went, jammed under boulders, slung in the tops of dead trees, splayed on the plains, and what it must have smelled like, and the two vultures and two turkey buzzards from the ark taking up their given thrones on the jutting hip bones of the nearest corpses, and whether those first months after disembarking were spent piling the dead, large and small, into heaps and burning them in pyres that consumed families and villages, the people intermingled in the thick braided columns of black smoke that drifted up into the sky and across the land and settled back across it in a fine layer of ash in which all the seeds of the renewed world were sown and by which they were all quickened. Nathan leaned closer and worked on the details of the little bird's mask and imagined dark Ham, that's one of Noah's sons, at dusk, exhausted from dragging bodies by their ankles and heaping them in piles to burn, angered at not having been able to resist looking at the faces of the dead and trying to guess what children belonged to what mothers, what husbands belonged to what wives, what beloved servants to what kind masters, loyal to and in love with every corpse, despite what his somber, sober, God-struck father had told him, and which he had still and still wholly believed, as much as he missed the former world. Standing by the radius of embers and bones left from the day's cremations, looking east across the plains and seeing the faint glow of fair Shem's blaze at the base of the foothills in the distance, then looking west and seeing the plated columns of smoke from coppery Japheth's fires rising near the sea, and missing both his brothers more sharply than he thought he'd ever have been able to imagine after having been shut up with them in that boat for so many weeks. Nathan drew and daydreamed about the stories Leah and Captain Diamond, two missionaries who were on the island. Nathan drew and daydreamed about the Bible stories Leah and Captain Diamond read to him and the other school children, and the afternoon passed, and the sun burned his back and shoulders and neck. That evening, he had to lie shirtless on his stomach in the grass while Grammy Honey, their last name is Honey, while Grammy Honey spooned cold tea onto his inflamed back, its skin scalded to livid, boiled coppery pink from ivory. Charlotte and Tabitha, his sisters, sat on either side of him and fanned him with leafy maple branches they'd stripped from a sapling. Later, during sweat-soaked bouts of sleep, a nightmare tormented him that he was suffocating within a pile of burning bodies, struggling to turn face up so he could cry out over the clamor of the flaming pyre and booming surf to frowning Japheth that he was not drowned, that, spared or forgotten, he was not one of the drowned. Nathan took a fever in the night, and Grammy cooled him with a rag soaked in the cold, weak tea. He muttered about Noah and dead families buried in common graves, and Grammy whispered to him, "Hush, think of what a glorious month in heaven it must have been while it rained down here, all those people arriving, freed from all the evil their hearts had been set on since every one of them had been little kids." Burned forearms, singed noses, sun-branded necks were nothing new to anyone on the island. Men, women, children were all well used to such scorchings from the sun directly above and from its reflection off the mirror of the Atlantic in which their shiny, tiny pebble of a home sloshed. Grammy had a repertoire of cures: cold tea, mint compress, macerated plantains. She munched leaves and spat the paste into her fingers and smeared it across the boy's back. Grammy's remedies had none of the salubrious comforts of the medicines that she imagined on the mainland. No baths of cold, fresh milk or poultices of oatmeal mixed with spring water. No slab of raw beefsteak plastered over a black eye. Her compounds were spare and vaporous. Essences distilled, brewed, steeped, reduced, concentrated into drops and small thimblefuls by a medicine woman who herself mostly survived on pipe smoke, black tea, ocean air, and the word of God. She concocted salves salutary to souls with empty stomachs and lean lives lived on shallow soil and bare rock. Thank you.
All right, again, I'm just going to be a disembodied voice for a second. Thank you so much, Paul. That was amazing. So now we are supposed to have Juan read, but Juan is not here. I can't get him onto the computer. So would you both like to read something, a little something else? Linda, do you have another poem you wanted to share?
Sure. I have all these books in here. I'm sure I can find another poem. Okay. Whoops. Okay. This is called The Cossacks for Franny Smythe. For Jews, the Cossacks are always coming. Therefore, I think the sunspot on my arm is melanoma. Therefore, I celebrate New Year's Eve by counting my annual dead. My mother, when she was dying, spoke to her visitors of books and travel, displaying serenity as a form of manner, though I could tell the difference. But when I watched you planning for a life you knew you'd never have, I couldn't explain your genuine smile in the face of disaster. Was it denial laced with acceptance? Or was it generations of being English, Bronte's Lucy in Villette, living as if no fire raged beneath her dun-colored dress? I want to live the way you did, preparing for next year's famine with wine and music as if it were a 10-course banquet. But listen, those are hoofbeats on the frosty autumn air. And wait. I wanted to read something from my very small, newest book, A Dog Runs Through It, which are all dog poems. And the reading that I gave was so sort of dark that I thought I'd read something a little lighter.
Lighten it up with a doggy one. I'm glad you're reading from this. We were talking about this book earlier, you and I. So many of my poems, as in the other reading, take place in the Garden of Eden in Genesis, and this is called In the Garden. I tell my dog to sit, and he sits, and I give him a biscuit. I tell him to come, and he comes and sits, and I give him a biscuit again. I tell my dog, lie down, and he sits, looking up at me with trust and adoration. I pause. I give him a biscuit. This is the beginning of love and disobedience. I was never meant to be a god. And one tiny poem that ends the book. And those of you, Lauren, I know you have a dog, will relate to this. It's called Envoi. It just ends the book. We're signing up for heartbreak. We know one day we'll rue it, but oh, the way our life lights up, the years a dog runs through it. So I will end with that. I love it. All right. Well, this is when you should have a little conversation. So I'll leave you two to kind of chat for a little while, and I'll come back at the end for questions. So if anybody has any questions for Linda and Paul, click the ask a question down below, and we'll get to them in just a minute. So I'll leave you guys for a few, okay?
Okay.
So Linda, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I have things I actually wanted to ask you about, having just finished your book, Tinkers, which I hadn't read before. And so that these questions that I have relate more to that than to what you've just read. And one is that there are sections of the book that could be called small prose poems. In fact, I could see how I could put line breaks in there and really make them into poems. It was kind of fun fiddling with that. But I just wondered, first of all, if you wrote poetry, and second of all, if you see categories being important, what genre it is, or whether things can just spill into each other.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great questions. When I tried to write poetry, I never could figure out where to put the line breaks. So I think of Tinkers as being unlineated lyric prose. And in a former life, I was a drummer. I played drums for many years in touring bands. So I write by rhythm and write by ear. So I know what the tempo is. I know what the time signature is. I know what the rhythm is, often before I know what the literal, meaning of a sentence is. So yeah, and I think that's right. The distinctions, I talk about this a lot with my students too, which is a lot of the distinctions between genres are either made up by the marketing department or the academic department, right? And we as artists, our job is to make works of art that are consistent with themselves. And I feel like if I get that, I don't care if you call it a hot fudge sundae.
Right.
So, yeah. I think of it as poetry.
Well, when I was starting to write, when I was in my early 20s, I wanted to be a novelist, because if you were a writer, that's where it was. I mean, fame and fortune, you had to write novels. And so I wrote a novel and sent it around, and everyone said, there isn't any plot. There aren't any characters. There's just language. What do you think you're doing? And so I said, well, maybe I shouldn't be writing a novel, but maybe I should try again.
Yeah, it's funny. I couldn't get Tinkers published to save my life for reasons along those lines. So I just ended up, I just rejected the rejection letters. People said, nobody wants to read a quiet, introspective, birch bark metaphysics. And I just said, I do. So yeah, I think that it can be tough because you have to sort of persist in your own deepest impulses. So I'm fascinated with you writing about Eden a lot. I teach the Old Testament, and so I'm fascinated with Genesis in particular. And so I'm just interested in what you keep orbiting back to Eden, that sort of, you're haunted by it. I'm just curious to hear how you would describe that.
I have two figures that have haunted me. One is Eve and one is Penelope. So I also have lots and lots of Odyssey poems, but I keep going back to Eve. I have a poem. Finally, I wrote Eve on her deathbed is the name of one of my poems. I thought I'd be able to stop writing if I killed her off, but I wasn't able to. So I mean, even when I'm writing about my dog, Eve gets in. Look who we have.
Hey,
it's a miracle. Juan is here. Oh my goodness.
All right, Juan.
I'm gonna cry right now.
Do you have a little something you could read for us?
Could you read?
Okay. All right. Paul and Linda, I'm sorry to cut you guys off, but let's give Juan a few minutes. I'm going to put you away and I'll bring you back in just a minute.
God.
Juan, I'm not even, you had a fantastic entrance. I think that's all the intro that you need. I'm gonna leave you to it. You ready?
Sure. I'm ready.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I'm ready. Okay. Yes, actually, thank you so much. And I enjoy listening to you read poetry. And as I was looking at the comments on the right side, I went through a billion combinations of addresses, links, and I found a very long one. It was like a giant trout, and that's the one that worked. Thanks.
Good. I'm so glad that you made it. So I'm gonna just turn my camera off and we'll let you do the reading. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
But that hurt a little bit. You know what I want to do? I want to feature this poet Itzolin Valdemar Garcia. He passed away at 27 years of age, and this is his book, A Book of Itzolin, born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I just think his poetry is so great. And I'll read one of mine, and I'll read one of his. And it's right here. It's called Codex Itzolin. Book of red eyes, of black hands. Zacateco eyes hold the corn. They tear away the baby. His skin is red. His tongue is a gold moth. The young Chicanito always wants to walk without clothes. His body hurts him. One day he begins to scratch at it and he finds green and blue feathers beneath his skin. Sacred, Scared, thirsty, wanting to touch the sky, he strips off his outer layer. He lifts the trees of his arms. His friends help him to move. He no longer has a sex. He has memories. His feathers are made of old wires, old voices. The colors bend from his arms and touch the world. Mira nomás, see that bird. His eyes always looking at you. His turquoise blood. What do you see behind closed eyes? The white sky crossed by a jaguar of ink, the woman whose hands make a bowl filled with red circles, the mountain that pushes until it makes light into stone. You have always known you are a jaguar made of the night. Paint what you see, all the hands, all the eyes. I really felt his poetry and his story as he writes it in that book. And he rarely has been mentioned, and I wanted to kind of break through a bit and feature at least one of his poems, Itzolin, Valdemar Garcia. This is Roll Under the Waves. And I just can't believe how the border issues I guess they've just been here all along. They've been here since my father crossed in 1906, and earlier than that in the late 1800s. And they're still here. These issues of that borderline, that really is a constructed line. It doesn't really exist. Roll under the waves. We roll under the waves, not above them. We body surf and somehow we lose the momentum. There are memories trailing us, empty orange and hot pink bottles of medicines left behind, buried next to a saguaro. There are baby backpacks and 1,000 shoes and 1,000 gone steps, leading in more directions without destination. There are men laying face down forever, and women dragging under the fences, and children still running with torn faces, all the way to Tucson, leathery and peeling. There are vigilantes with skull dust in their palms, and the trigger, and the sputum, and the moon with its pocked hope, and its blessings, and its rotations into the spikes. There's a road forgotten, with a tiny sweet roof of twigs, and a black griddle threaded with songs like the one about el contrabando from El Paso. There is nothing, a stolen land, forgotten too, a stolen life, branded and tied and thrown into the tin patrol box with flashes of trees and knife-shaped rivers, and the face of my mother loose, and water running next to the animals, still thrashing, choking, the low burnt, violin muffled screams and rings of roses across the mountains. And so this whole book is about this, and it's written to America. Who else could we write it to? And this is what we're all doing today, and every day. We write to America with our lives, and the question is, have we gotten a response? This is the title poem. Every day we get more illegal. Yet the peach tree still rises and falls with fruit, and without, birds eat it, the sparrows fight. Our desert burns with trash and drug. It also breathes and sprouts vines and maguey. Laws pass, laws with scientific walls, detention cells, husband with the son, the wife, and the daughter who married a citizen. They stayed behind, broken, slashed, half shadows in the apartment to deal out the day. And the puzzles, another law, then another, Mexican, Indian, spirit, exile, migration, sky. The grass is mowed, then blown by a machine. Sidewalks are empty, clean, and the red-shouldered hawk peers down from an abandoned wooden dome, an empty field. It is all between the light. Every day this changes a little. Yesterday, homeless and without papers, Alberto left for Denver, a Greyhound bus, he said, where they don't check you. Walking, working, under the silver darkness, walking, working, our mind, our life. So those are the two poems from the book. Every day we get more illegal, every day. And it's just not migrants. If one of us is constructed and painted and boxed as illegal, we are all constructed and painted and boxed as illegal. So the question is freedom, liberation, compassion. America, what nation will we build again? The one we have may not be the one we dreamed of. So thank you for everything. Thanks for allowing me to zip in sideways like a trapezoid. And I finally made it. Thank you. And it's great to hear your poets tonight as I was floating through, I don't know where I was.
You were in the interwebs. You were stuck in the interwebs.
It was
I'm
a
glad
funny place.
I'm glad you made it. Hilma Wallitzer in the comments, she said that you were so worth waiting for. So I'm glad that you made it. I'm going to bring Linda and Paul back up. We don't have much time left, but now that Juan is here, I definitely want to let you guys kind of chat for a little bit before we take some questions. Or we could start with questions. I would like to know. I'm always interested if you weren't writers, what would you do for work?
Probably
Paul,
the same thing.
Well, I know what I'd like to do for work, and what I would have done if I could have would be to be a painter. But I'm no good at all at painting, so I write very visual poetry and a lot of poems about paintings. But that's what I would, if somebody was asking what talent would you like to be given, that would be it.
Painting, that's a good one. What about you, Paul? Would you go back to music?
Yeah, I would love to. I loved playing drums. I love the collaborative aspect of making music with other people. I'm also an admirer of paintings. I love to look at paintings, and it's interesting to me because I look at paintings and I think, how would I go about making that color? And I don't know. Like it's to be confounded by my own eyes. So I try to paint with words in a way, use a lot of color. But yeah, definitely some music or the arts, non-negotiable.
Yeah. Juan, you look like you are a painter over there. You're in a studio.
Yeah, I would do the same thing as well. I would be painting or sculpting. I always wanted to get into sculpture, and the lines were either too long, or I really was I was in a fantasy because you either do the sculpture workshop or you do the writing workshop, and you just can't do them both because they both take a gazillion hours to do. So I thought I could do that. I probably still could, but not with a foundry and all that. So I'd be painting, sculpting, or I would be in a Zen monastery. One of those three.
Very interesting. Okay. Let me see. Linda, we have a question here from Jesse. And also, if anybody in the audience has a question, drop it down below. This one, Linda, do you write about ordinary things because there's nothing more ordinary than just living a life, and there is nothing more beautiful than living a life?
It's really interesting that question came up, because one of the things that I was going to ask Paul was that when men write quiet books about ordinary life, everybody loves it. when a woman does it, they say, "Oh, well, she's just a domestic writer writing about ordinary things." It drives me a little bit crazy. And I actually have a poem that I probably can't find now called "The Ordinary," which is an answer to that. And at the end of the poem is "The ordinary that comes to save me." So I don't know if that answers your question, but life is made up of ordinary things that we have to look at more closely.
Mm-hmm.
That's what poets do. They look at things closely. And that's why I think I said at the beginning that in some ways, I think that all poetry is political and can, by making the reader look closely at things, change them. I mean, I used to think that evil was just a failure of the imagination, a failure of the person to put themselves in someone else's shoes, and that poetry could help that. I'm not so optimistic anymore. I think after the 4 years we've gone through, that there really are people that can't be helped that way, that there really is, call it original sin if you like, but there is evil out there.
Mm-hmm. And we return to Eden again. Here we are.
Right. At Apple.
Who would you say, this is for all of you, who would you say are some of your biggest influences in your writing?
Well, I can say that one of my absolute, greatest influences is the novelist and essayist Marilyn Robinson. I learned how to write from her and from Elizabeth McCracken as well. And I just think when Linda was talking about women writing about her Marilyn Robinson's first novel, Housekeeping, very scaled to the domestic level, meals and people in this small domestic space. And I just think it's magnificent. It's one of those examples of the almost infinitesimally or infinitesimal. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing. Breaking onto the infinite.
Mm-hmm.
You find the seed of the entire universe, and it elaborates itself into this entire kind of cosmology over the course of that novel. Mm-hmm. And then my other big influence was the jazz drummer Elvin Jones, who was John Coltrane's drummer for years. And I say that I got a second MFA watching him. I probably saw him 50 times. He used to sit right next to his drum set, and I can't repeat what he'd say, but every night he'd see me and he'd go, "You mother effer," and just watching him night after night.
Wow.
Sit down, whether he had a cold, whether he was tired, whether he was fighting with his wife or whatever, he would just count off and go straight out into the cosmos. And so it was the absolute apex of artistry and work ethic, professionalism.
Mm-hmm. What about Linda? Who are your influences?
Well, when I was in college, the first English course I took was given by some I.A. Richards. I don't know if people know his critiques nowadays. And he stood up and in the most wonderful English accent read Shakespeare's 73rd sonnet. And when I heard him read that, I said, okay, that's what I want to do. But I can't say that Shakespeare was an influence. It was an inspiration. When I'm feeling very blocked and can't really write, there are two poets that I go to help. One is William Stafford, because he makes it sound so easy. It's almost as if he's talking to you and I start talking back, and the beginning of the poem will be a Stafford poem, and I'll have to get rid of that, but it'll allow me. And the other is when I read something like Galway Kinnell's Book of Nightmares. The metaphors in that are so exciting that it makes me want to make up some metaphors. I mean, those two people really help me when things are not going well. But I can't say that they're influences. It depends what you mean by that word.
And what about you, Juan?
Well, I think everything is always, moving us and moving all of us. And so every split second, we're getting inspired. In terms of writers, the ones that were either, I would say, let's say, late 60s, mid 60s, late 60s. The surrealist poets, Antonin Artaud, performer, actor, writer, letter fire breather, burned off the eyelashes of the critics when they read his letters that he directed at them. Same thing with Benjamin Perret, who was not as wild as Antonin Artaud. And just the diaries of Dali, and the poetry of Picasso, his 1958 Hunk of Skin, put out by City Lights. I just think it was so incredible, basically made out of pieces. Just put a bunch of pieces together, shards, right? Word shards. Burgundy red, cheese, bread, and like that. And then you build it, and there it is. It's not therefore, yes, it hurt, life, the opaque peak. It wasn't that. It was just pieces of things. And I thought that was extremely inspiring. And the post-war Polish poets, for their direct life just popping right through the pages about something that was impossible to write about. Zbigniew Herbert, Wisława Szymborska, and Tadeusz Rosewicz, especially him. And the last few lines of his poem, "The Survivor," he says, "At 24, led to slaughter, we survived." And just those three lines, demolish us. So I said, this is so that right there, that moment just threw me into a kind of just writing directly and saying what really is going on, not just a little, cool surrealistic wash that I like, that I also like. So that was very influential for me. And of course, all the political poets or social movement poets or poets of that era for me, my generation. So it was whatever, where it was Allen Ginsberg, and further on into the 60s and 70s, Chicano movement writers. And then my mother and father, the farm worker ballads. So all that, and all the jazz artists, like you were saying a while ago, Coltrane and the classic 50s, the classic jazz. In fourth grade, I was living in San Francisco, and my teenage Chicano beatnik cousin played all the jazz all night long and all day long. So my fourth grade head got reshaped by Thelonious Monk, Coltrane, Jader, and Horace Silver. So you put all that together with patchouli and sandalwood and yoga and kundalini,
and you get one.
And here I am, folks.
I love that. I think it's so interesting that you all brought up music with your writing. And specifically, Paul and Juan, you just mentioned jazz music, which typically has no lyrics for the most part. So your poetry is inspired by the actual music. I think that's super cool and interesting.
Yeah, and just tearing out. Yeah. Like you said a while ago, breaking onto the infinite. You just got to tear out, and you tear out of here and go as far as you can. And the landing on Mars and all that stuff recently, and all these rockets going up, and there's insurrection, breaking down the government and.
Did he freeze?
Dramatic.
That's a wonderful time to freeze.
Oh my God, this is a weird one tonight. I don't know what's going
So,
on.
so the thing is, we're kind of all looking for that other place. We're looking for that other place. We it all burned out. Not that it really burned out, and there's nowhere to go. We always find a garden, create a garden. But in some sense, there's a positioning of getting out of the planet. There's a positioning of getting out of the planet, and which is something that just came up because of what you all were talking about. There's a kind of a positioning of reorienting ourselves further out, and in fact, the work is right here. The work is right here. Yeah, kind of interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, jazzing out of here.
Sun Ra. Space
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
yeah.
space is the place.
So raw.
So we are running out of some time here, but I have a couple of questions left. We have one from George Colt and Anne Fadiman. They are going to be reading next week. So this is a question for all three of you. Are you the kind of writer who needs to get a line or a verse or paragraph perfect before you can go on to the next one? Or do you need to pour everything out and then go back and refine? Let's just start with
there's just one refine.
Just one. Okay.
I put it all out without thinking and then spend a month revising. I have a poem that ends, "Revision is the purest form of love." And you can see my dog.
Oh, there's your dog.
Told you he'd make an appearance. But the stuff that comes out at first onto the page, you're sort of like excreting the marble that then you get to chisel. And I don't know where that comes from. And I don't think that can be taught. It's the chiseling and the revising and the craft that you could teach. But if the other is very mysterious, I don't like to think about it too much because I'm afraid it'll stop. But those are two very distinct parts of the writing.
Yeah.
What about you, Paul?
I revise endlessly. I think of it as a big feedback loop. I just because one of the things I constantly do is print up hard copies of the manuscript I'm working on and begin from the begin and revise right through until I catch up where I'm. So I'm always, the front end is always just riffing and improvisation, and then it gets more and more formalized and polished and revised behind that. So it's always
same thing.
Yeah. Each one is delicious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Each one is a delicacy. Just being so excited about writing something, or having a melody in our system, in our mind, body, and then just following it. That's just such a beautiful experience. And then you can't wait to revise. It's like, oh, now I get I'm going to revise. Oh, can't wait. Oh, so then you have this great time revising. Oh yeah. It's like a little delicate dance, a little delicate dance. You do a little delicate dance, and then the third is, that's about it. The third time you come back and with little tinctures, you got little box of tinctures, and you little tincture it, little, and then that's it. You just cool it down. You cool it down. Yeah. And most likely you're done, unless it's kind of a challenger, little challengey poem.
I don't think you're ever done. I take poems once they're in a book, and I'll cross things out in the published book and change them.
I can do that too. You can do that too. Right? Yeah. Wow. Yeah, but it's all one long thing. It's all one since pre-birth, birth, existence, beyond, bye-bye birdie, and you continue and you loop back, and that's all one poem. It's just one infinite.
He's frozen again.
Yeah. I think his internet.
Yeah, we created we created a little partitions. It's okay, it's all right.
All right. And then this was just our last question because we are running over, but we lost a little bit of time in the beginning. This one is from Laura Tucker, another one of our writers. So Linda, you had kind of answered this before, but if you have anything else to add, please feel free. Laura wants to know, what do you do for writer's block?
Well, William Stafford, again, is very famous for saying there is no such thing as writer's block if your standards are low enough. And he really believed it. He didn't say it as a joke. He would write every single morning at 5 a.m. He'd get up, and he said he didn't care if it was good or not. It was the process that was important. And I can't quite go along that far, but you just sit there and you do it.
You gotta force it out.
I've never really had writer's block for more than a week or two. I have a very quiet life. It gets boring. If there's nothing to do, I have to sit down and write a poem. Or make a cake.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Any tips for writer's block from you guys?
Writer's block. Oh, sometimes I'll get, when I get too busy, that's when the good old block, comes in, knocks on the door. It's Juan here. I'm the block, because I just get too busy. And like Linda just said, when you have all the open space, kind of gives your mind gives you room to create. Otherwise, we're trying to write something in between going to a Bond's marketplace and get 6 things on the list, and I got to get back to Lauren. I can't get into the Zoom, and I got 5 other little manuscript ideas I want to draw. That's when the block rolls in, because you can't force it, and all of a sudden you blocked it because you got too much going on. So it's good to have all the more open space, more letting go, and then you'll have the whole city. You won't just have a block; you have the whole city, but it won't be a block. It'll just be a straightaway in. The more time, the more freedom, like Linda said. I think that works best. Or not expect so much, right, Paul? Not expect so much.
That's right. I'm trying to think of the line from a Auden poem, something about like the truth, like love and sleep, resists direct approach. If you look right at it, it scatters. So I spend months on end, to all appearances, napping on the couch, with a nice book tented on my, and just I ride the updrafts. I feel like I'm always writing, if not always typing.
That's true. That's true. I remember I went to a talk by Susan Sontag, back in the late Susan, back in the late 70s, and she said she would go to a cabin, and she'd take her journal, which is full of titles and little scribblings. She liked titles a lot, and then whatever little notes, a bunch of notes, and then she'd head to this little shack, and she'd stay there for, let's say, 2-3 weeks, and start from the beginning and all the way to the end. She would just crank it all out. That way, it's alive. You got it cooking, and there's no something else to do. You just do one straight non-stopper. Get a little wheat bar or something, a non-stopper. And sometimes that definitely knocks out the writer's block, because you got the feeling, you got the melody, you got the excitement and everything else, and you just go for it. And then you'll go from A to B to Z and beyond, and you'll have it. It'll be right there. We'll write a little tiny piece and let it get cold, and come back 3 days later, that little fish is gone. The little goldfish is gone. Yeah. So Sontag that's what Sontag's style. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, it is 8:15, and I think this is a good time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in tonight. Thank you to Paul, Linda, and Juan. I'm so glad that you made it and that we were able to get a reading from you. And yeah, thank you again, everyone tuning in. And thank you to Roger, most of all, for putting this all together for us.
And thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome. My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Lauren.
And I will be back next Monday at 7 p.m. with George Householt, Ann Fadiman, and Carl Phillips. So we will see you then. Bye.
See you, Linda. See you.